Lethal Company is a game that came out of nowhere. From being a small release in an ocean of indie games on Steam, to selling 1.7 million copies in its first month and outselling Call of Duty, this game instantly became a force to be reckoned with. But games like this happen all the time, and while there's many games that grow past initial hype and live to tell the tale, there are way more games that blow up out of the gate and fizzle into obscurity within a couple months. So in this review, I want to look at Lethal Company from an outside perspective and see why Lethal Company is blowing up and if the game is really worth all the rave coming its way. Also, the game is only $10, so that was a place to start. But before I start, I need to mention that this is an early access review. The game is not fully released and more content is already on its way. Some of the content's already been released before I even started playing the game. But consider this review first impressions. With that being said, let's get into it. Right into booting up the game, I could immediately see part of why this game is so popular. And that's this game's art style. Lethal Company has a very basic but unique art style, which is something that many other popular games follow as well. Simple but different enough that it stands out, and that perfectly defines Lethal Company. From the simple color palette of shades of gray and orange, to the slightly pixelated 3D environments that wash out finer details, it makes for an interesting looking game that also works perfectly in the genre of Lethal Company. On top of the graphical design, the player models are instantly recognizable, something that might be a recurring theme in popular titles of the past. But I guess now I should talk about the gameplay. Now, before I even played the game, I only knew about two things about it. One is that it's a co-op game, and the other was that it's a survival horror game, which I believe also plays in part to its massive success, but I'll get into that later. But essentially, Lethal Company's gameplay is very basic. You play as a group of workers for a company that requires scrap from other planets. Your job is to go land on these randomly generated planets and collect... Your job is to go land on these randomly generated planets and collect scrap to bring back to the company. But of course it isn't that easy. On these planets you land on, there's tons of unique enemies types, from bees to dogs and whatever the fuck this is. And you only have a limited amount of time on each planet before it starts to get dark, so you have to haul ass with all the scrap back to your ship without getting killed. On top of this, you have a quota to fulfill, so you only have a few days of in-game time to get the required amount of scrap, or else you lose the game. If you fulfill the quota, you get an even higher quota to fulfill, and the game keeps going like this. Luckily, you can use your scraps you earn to purchase things such as walkie-talkies for communication with teammates, flashlights, and other shit that I can't afford because I keep fucking losing. And if you lose the game, that's it. You start from the very beginning, straight back to square one. No scraps, no credits, no anything. Which is where I realized the true fun in the game. It's a roguelike, and I love roguelikes. When you look at it from the surface level, it's really not that different from a game like The Binding of Isaac. You have to keep going through randomly generated areas as the game progressively gets harder, but you progressively get stronger throughout the game, collecting new items. But none of it'll matter at the end because if you die, it's back to the drawing board. And this is where the fun lies in Lethal Company. You have to strategize exactly what you'll do with your teammates to ensure success. You'll likely have someone staying back at the ship to watch over the other teammates over the cameras. You might schedule a time to leave the planet a few hours before it gets dark, or which type of flashlight to buy with the limited credits on hand. All quick planning and strategies employed in random environments that keep the game fresh, all while constantly improving at the game. Something I've always loved about roguelikes. You may lose it all inside of an hour, but you'll come back with more knowledge than you ever did before. Which is bolstered by the co-op play, which is heavily enforced in Lethal Company. Unlike other roguelikes, which might have a couch co-op option, if anything at all, Lethal Company's whole thing is that it's a co-op roguelike game, which of course helps this game out a lot in terms of enjoyment and replayability. With the proximity chat and teamwork basically being mandatory, it makes Lethal Company stand out amongst not only other roguelikes, but other games in general. The only downside is that playing this game solo fucking sucks. It's basically impossible to get far in the game without any other players, essentially forcing you to either play with friends or join public lobbies. Solo's also no fun at all. I was bored as shit the entire time I played. But what I find interesting about Lethal Company is that a lot of the draw of the game is the horror elements and freaky environments that the game puts you in, which in addition to cooperative play, make for plenty of funny videos online of people freaking out in the voice chat, which was initially an incentive to buy the game for me to try the game out with my friends. And while the environments and horror elements are amazing and convincing as fuck, a lot of what kept me wanting to play was the strategy that lies beneath the horror and scary elements. Where to look for scrap, what each enemy is weak to, how to bring scrap back to the ship efficiently. Stuff like this makes the game a lot deeper than meets the eye, and makes the game way more interesting than just scary enemy chasing me. It reminds me of Phasmophobia in the sense that the draw to that game is the scary moments, but a lot of the staying power is strategizing and optimizing your runs to make maximum profit. It's essentially the same here, but done in a different way. It's surprisingly well made for an indie developer. Which brings me back to why Lethal Company is so popular, which, after playing, it's pretty obvious why the game has such fanfare. The game is simple, easy to understand, but hard to master, which is what all popular games are like. It has a simple but unique art style, which is what all popular games have. It's addicting as fuck, which is what all popular games have. You get what I'm saying. So in terms of comparisons like this, nothing really stands out about Lethal Company. It's a spooky co-op horror game with proximity chat, something that's certainly been done before. However, it still stands out among the millions of other games flooding the market, and is certainly more unique than most AAA games coming out these days. But that's another video. My only real complaints with Lethal Company is the lack of content, which is of course going to be remedied later down in the game's life cycle, but it's still kind of a shame as the game gets repetitive kinda quick. I'm roughly 10 hours deep in gameplay and it's getting kind of bland. Walk in, grab stuff, run from enemies, repeat. There's just not too much in the loot or room generation pool to make it super varied. Just dark hallways and some rooms with lights. The only other thing I don't like is the basically requirement to play 4-player. Anything less than 4-player co-op is very limited, and anything less than 3-player is basically impossible to make any progress. It gets really frustrating, really fast. But other than that, the game isn't that bad. But overall so far, I like the game a lot. I can't say I've played so much that I know everything, but from what I've played so far, the game is a fucking blast and I can't wait to play more. My complaints are very few of the game, my only real complaints being the solo play that I mentioned earlier and the lack of content, but these will more than likely be changed in a future update. After all, the game did just come out and it's in early access. The game's only been out for a little over a month and already has a content update. Like it's already beating out Payday 3. But I'm sure there's plenty more content to come. Even so, why not give it a shot? The game's only $10, and for the content you get, it's a pretty fucking good deal. It runs well on basically any system that's not a fucking fossil, and hardly has any flaws, so I recommend it. Get some friends to play with though. I'm not going to leave a number review, but to answer the question from the very beginning of the video, Lethal Company does live up to the hype. Just as a little outro for the video, thank you guys for watching my review. If you enjoyed it, feel free to leave a comment, like, or subscribe, whatever you like. This is my first review I've ever made, and it's also my first time using DaVinci Resolve. If you couldn't tell, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing, but I'm gonna try and improve as the videos go by. But if you enjoyed the video, I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.